We were
What are you doing
initially
at
thinking.
the
Oh, I'm sorry. Go
what are
ahead.
you doing at the what are you doing at the corner of Melrose and Breveter?
Some very tiny curb extensions.
Okay.
I mean, it would have been handy to do it at Belvedere, since it's such a wide street. But Melrose is such a good example of a street that could be a really good candidate for a bicycle boulevard. So we were trying to make sure we had one bicycle focused demonstration project and one pedestrian focused project. So the one on Morton this past week was more pedestrian focused. So we're now shifting a little more to the bike focus.
I saw the photo on LinkedIn that Yasmin posted, and it looked good, looked worthwhile, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. We'd set up the delineators, and then one of them got hit surprisingly by a motorcycle, of all things. And like we saw like a large construction vehicle that was like towing a backhoe make the turn and not hit it. So it was a very interesting like time. So it's definitely an intersection that could use some love and a little bit of traffic calming. So
yeah, it's one of those streets in Albany that's just a little bit too wide for 2 lanes and too narrow for 4 lanes. And so there's just this extra space that people use to go, to go fast, or to justify going fast.
Right.
Too fast. Interesting. Melrose was a bike boulevard in the old bike plan, right?
Yeah, I believe so. So it's really just showcasing that. Initially, we were wanting to do a demonstration project on Breveter, but just based on the cost to demonstrate temporary bicycle lanes, it was a little outside of the budget because it would have been in the thousands of dollars to execute that. So unfortunately, we weren't able to get that this go around. But a lot of our citizen advisory committee members had mentioned how much they liked Melrose and wanted to showcase that. So that's how we were able to pivot that way, but also do something on the corner of Breveter, just to get that feedback for the plan, so we're not losing out on that going forward.
Okay, good. Now, Melrose has the distinction of being built over the original railroad alignment between Albany and Schenectady. So that's why it's at that weird angle. Yeah.
Interesting you mentioned that, because we're going to be talking about the railroad embankment tonight for 1415 Washington Avenue. So that's
okay. Yeah, that's right. Part of the same thing. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, it's the only portion of the original railroad that hasn't been built over.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Hi guys. We're waiting for Glenisa. Roman just signed on.
Glenisa, I think, is at an emergency board meeting. So Amy said she was going to phone in when she got off that.
Okay.
But I think we have everyone else.
Alrighty. We also have, looks like a few attendees. So we have 10 folks listening in. So when you're ready to start, I'll give my spiel, and then we can go from there.
The only thing I'd mentioned before that is we were talking about at the last meeting of scheduling a separate meeting for the 76. So I think, just making that an agenda item for tonight, just to discuss, when we want to hold that kind of session or time to speak on the project, just to dive in a little bit more, since we've had a lot busier of agendas in the past. This month we only have 2 items. So there's the possibility we could do that at the meeting for this month, or we could schedule, a separate meeting by itself if we want to dive in a little bit further.
Okay, yeah, I remember we did talk about that, and that's a good thing. So we'll do that as a third item, as a third discussion.
Yeah, another business item.
Yep.
So feel free to start whenever you are ready.
Okay. Good evening. This is a meeting of the Albany City Planning Board's workshop. Thank you very much for attending, for those who are listening in on this Zoom meeting. For those of you who haven't attended a planning board workshop meeting in the past, I will explain to you that this is essentially a discussion among the planning board members and the planning department staff and our corporation counsel. There is no discussion or testimony from the audience, but you will have the opportunity to do that at our next planning board meeting 2 weeks from today. However, by listening in and looking at the presentations that will be up on the screen, you will be able to get familiar with the projects or refamiliarize yourself with projects that we've been discussing in the past, but have yet to come to a final vote or final conclusion. The planning board members may, from time to time, for clarification, ask an applicant or perhaps another person listening in and watching if they have knowledge of the project that we're discussing, that we may have a question or two for clarification. So having said that, I will also mention that this is a short meeting as far as the agenda goes. Where these projects take us in terms of discussion might be slightly longer than that, but at this point, we just have 2 items on the agenda. So we'll begin with the first one, which is the project known as DPR 0093, and this is 244 State Street. The planning board has seen this project a couple of times at workshops and the planning board meetings, but haven't made a decision because there were a number of issues and items that came up, and there also had to be a number of analysis by the professional staff from the different city agencies. So where are we with this now, Zach?
All right, thanks, Al. So really quick updates. The applicant had mentioned this at their presentation at the last meeting, but they've updated the first floor plan to include a building manager unit. Before they had stated that the building manager would live nearby. That unit has shifted to inside the building. They've also enlarged the rear windows for the northwestern units of the building as well to allow more light after feedback from the planning department staff. The applicant was in the process of making some minor adjustments today for their affordable housing compliance plan. They submitted that this afternoon. And they're making 2 minor modifications to the site plan to respond to some comments from the Division of Traffic Engineering. Most of those are just site plan notes, so it's nothing major. So we expect those to be finished by the time of the meeting. So really at this point, there won't be any other department comments. So this is an application that the planning board is in a position to act on for the September 29th meeting. And I'll show the site plan here, which just kind of highlights the comments I just made as well. So are there any questions from the board on this one?
The windows, they have the enlarged rear windows. Are they any, significantly larger, or in terms of the size versus what they were before? Do you have an idea?
I would have to look back on the previous size, but I can send that information to the board once we get done with this meeting.
Okay. Board members, comments on this one? I know we had some discussions before about parking and size of units and all of that. Where are we with that? What are you thinking?
I was just going to ask what whether there had been any developments in the in the parking, on the parking issue. I know they were looking to lease some units in another nearby building in Commerce Plaza, I think it was. And I think there were some other discussions.
Yeah, so they've retained that as part of their traffic demand management plan. So the option's still there to do that. So, I mean, since it's not required for them to provide parking under our code, we're not going to be pushing any further for them to, provide a signed lease or dedicate any number of spaces. So at this point, really we've asked if they will, just kind of clarification or knowledge, but it's not a requirement that we're making as staff. So.
Okay.
And out of curiosity, Zach, the comment about employing a building manager unit to be on site, was that simply a matter of putting a little green writing or on the bottom of the screen, an arrow pointing to an existing unit with no changes?
Yeah, and I mean, this was in response to some of the community members' comments just about trash and maintenance and the importance of having someone on site in the building to be able to fix stuff. So that's why the applicant added that site or the floor plan note stating that that would be the unit for the building manager. So yeah, I mean, it's a very simple modification.
Okay.
But that was the intent of it.
Yeah, and there's nothing to hold them to keeping that as a building manager unit, is there? According to the planning department?
No, there's nothing requiring them to do that. They're doing that just, in response to community member comments.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else on this one? All right, so this will be on the agenda for final consideration 2 weeks from now. And we'll move on to the next one, which is a new project that we have seen in concept form, and that's 1415 Washington Avenue. This is a demolition of the existing, what's the name of the project? I forgot. The existing project that's there now, the building that's there, Crescent Hill Suites, is it?
I think it's Crest Hill Suites.
Crest Hill, yeah, Crest Hill Suites. That's going to be torn down, and this will be another student housing project. And we saw this in concept form. So why don't you walk us through this one?
Yep, so the applicant will be going for concept review at this meeting. They're looking to construct a student dormitory that'll be 5 stories, have 240 dwelling units, and approximately 207 parking spaces. So this is the site location. This is located in a mixed-use community urban zoning district. It's adjacent to an industrial, a heavy industrial district, and is across the street from a mixed-use campus institutional district, with SUNY Albany being across the street. There's also a historic overlay that goes across the southern portion of the property where the driveway is currently, but we'll get into that a little bit more as we move through the presentation. And kind of speaking back to Chris's comments, just kind of want to go over, the broader scope of things or picture of things, just so everyone kind of gets a sense of, the history of the site, as well as we'll be talking about the Washington Avenue, Patroon Creek corridor study on the next slide. So as I just mentioned, part of the property is within the Washington Avenue Historic District. This historic district contains the only remaining section of the Mohawk and Hudson Railroad, which was the first railroad in the state, along with an abandoned 1851 stone culvert for 6 Mile Waterworks. The proposed site plan includes minimal to no disturbance within the portion of the property that's in the historic district. But a phase 1A report will be required as part of their certificate of appropriateness application, just to determine whether, you know, further study is required based on the results of that report. And so this property is also along the study corridor for the Washington Avenue Patroon Creek corridor study. This was completed in April of 2019, and it was a study that was co-funded by the City of Albany as well as the Capital District Transportation Committee to look at potential complete streets design elements along Washington Avenue from Breviter Street to exit 2 of I-90. And the intent was to improve, you know, safety for all road users and respond to changing land uses along Washington Avenue, since there have been more dormitories that have been constructed along Washington Avenue. The one recommendation that's relevant to this property is to create cross connections between parcels on the north side of Washington Avenue. So this would provide options not only for pedestrians and cyclists, but also for motorists to not use Washington Avenue as much. So there are options that are maybe a little lower stress wise for road users. So it'll make it easier to get between sites, as well as reduce some of the traffic along Washington Avenue. So this is something that'll be looked at as our department's reviewing the project and as the planning board is reviewing the project. This is the proposed site plan. The configuration is a little odd when you're looking at it from a site plan view. So I'm going to move into the renderings because I think that'll give a better perspective for the project and a better understanding for you all. So these are before and after shots. What's kind of hard to tell from the site plan is that portions of the first floor will allow automobile access to the parking garages. So it is one building, but there are portions of the building that don't connect necessarily on the first floor, but will connect on upper floors. And here's a shot of the building from Washington Avenue. And this is heading east on I-90 as well. I think there have been some comments previously just about past dormitories and making sure that the facades facing the highway still you know, reflect standards as well, and are making sure that they're not blank facades, or at least providing some level of interest to people passing by. This is heading west along I-90. And then this is an interior shot. This is showing perspective from the northwestern portion of the site looking southeast. So this shows kind of as you wrap around to the back of the site, there'll be parking that follows the natural slope of the property. And then the image on the right shows the entrance area and lobby that you would see when entering from Washington Avenue.
Can you point, can you direct us to where the garage is? It's the very dark space underneath there?
Yeah, can you see my mouse moving?
Yes.
Yep,
Okay.
it would be here.
And then on the right-hand one, is that the entrance, the entire entrance to the building?
Yeah, so this area right here is the lobby.
Okay.
And so there's also some green space and a courtyard outside as well. And then these are some building sections as well, which will hopefully help kind of provide some context as well for the site. Again, showing these 2 levels of parking that are located towards the rear portion of the building, and also showing the proposed lobby area and where the units will be located, which are on the 2nd through 5th floors. And then this includes the basement floor plans as well. Again, this showing the 1st level of parking. And then the ground floor level also has some parking, but this is also the lobby area as well as some communal space and units as well. And then this is a typical floor plan for the 2nd through 5th floors.
And the lobby is contained in that bridge. So that bridge between the 2 buildings.
Nope, the lobby is actually located right here. You
Ah,
can see where my mouse is moving. It was that the glass area right here
yeah,
that's
okay.
shown in the rendering.
Now, what is the purpose of the bridge? Just to connect the 2 buildings, or are there apartments or suites in the bridge as well?
To provide a connection between the area as well as for units. So there'll be an internal hallway as well as units on either side of the hallway.
And it also allows people to walk indoors from their cars, from the garage to any of the apartments in the building, right?
Yep. Or at least in a covered space.
Right.
So again, as I mentioned before, there's 240 units. The unit mix hasn't been broken out. They are proposing to do 1, 2, and 4 bedroom units. There will be a total of 560 beds overall. They're proposing 207 parking spaces, although the maximum permitted for a dormitory would be 138. The applicant is applying for an area variance. The applicant's also applying for a second area variance for exceeding the maximum permitted front yard setback. But part of that is in response to the portion of the property that's located in the Washington Avenue Historic District, so they don't want to disturb that portion of the site. So that's why they're proposing a larger than permitted setback. And this project will be considered a type 1 action under seeker due to the number of residential units that are being proposed. And lead agency letters would be sent out to the Board of Zoning Appeals since they're applying for 2 area variances, to the Historic Resources Commission since they're reviewing a certificate of appropriateness application, the City of Albany Industrial Development Agency since they're seeking funding through them, as well as New York State Department of Transportation due to the proximity to I-90, and University at Albany since it's across the street as well. And sorry to give, just as a reminder for you all, this will be going for development plan review, demolition review, as well as conditional use permit review, since dormitories are conditional use within the mixed use community urban zoning district.
Question on the historic district. If the 1A study indicates necessarily not only keeping that open, but doing perhaps other things to mark the historic nature of the culvert and the railroad, what would that be? What would that look like? Would the Historic Resources Commission require just signs, historic signs? Would they actually have an excavation of the culvert and the railroad bed, or how would that look?
Yeah, I mean, I think that depends a lot on what the phase 1A report finds. I think the primary goal is to determine whether the proposed construction would impact the existing resources. I think the intended goal is to leave them in place right now. But if it gets to a point where the proposed design would not allow for that, then a phase 1B might look at site modifications to the floor plate, as well as potentially maybe moving resources so that they are protected during construction. Typically this is going to be something where design modifications would be made over moving the actual resources themselves, because the importance of this district is that it is the last remaining uncovered, unmoved portion of that railroad. So the priority for those resources is to keep them in situ.
Yeah, I mean, not only is it the first railroad in the area, but it also signaled the demise of the use of the Erie Canal.
It's got a lot of cultural relevance.
Yeah.
Where exactly are the historical improvements currently at on the site?
I believe they're to the north and the eastern portion of the district. There's a lot of vegetation right now, so I think it's a little bit difficult to see that easily. But I believe they're in this portion of the site.
On that map, what's the yellow signify? Is that I-90?
Yep.
Okay.
So does it kind of go directly through the site then, Zach, or?
Yeah, the district cuts through the site. The portion of the district that cuts through the site has already been paved over with the driveway. So, there's not going to, the applicant's not proposing any changes to that at this time. It's really just the proximity to the resources that are in that northeastern portion of the district that are more of a concern, because the building is, located fairly close to the border of the historic district on the eastern side.
So is the historic district actually owned by the developers, or is it a separate lot?
So the historic district goes across a few properties. So, the applicant owns this portion of the district,
Right,
but I
okay.
believe this crosses 4 or 5 lots in total.
Okay.
Are there other questions on this or comments?
Well, I think the first thing, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Martin.
No, I was going to say the first thing that jumps into my mind is the issues we had with the previous one, the Alden, which are pedestrian accommodation. And I know the linkage study went a long way to alleviating those, but I'd like to know more about where that stands and what improvements are actually likely to be made, and whether or not we could ask for some of those improvements to be made by the developer as part of approvals.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something to look into. I think, unfortunately, with that site, with the cross, if there were a cross easement to be created, it would be going from a driveway to a parking lot, which is not, necessarily the most pedestrian friendly.
Right.
And a lot of what that study recommended was installing a multi-use path on the south side of Washington Avenue as opposed to the north side. But yeah, I mean, definitely looking into pedestrian accommodations will be an important part of the review of this project. Again, since the primary thrust or reason why that study was completed was to address issues of pedestrian safety and motorist safety as a result of new dormitories being constructed.
Right. Okay.
One thing that I think I brought up at the last meeting, and I'll bring it up again. I have a concern about the water issues in that area. And I want to make sure that our water and sanitary engineers are certain that there's going to be enough pressure to serve that property and also to, you know, handle the wastewater. Because it has been my experience in that area in attending physicians' offices farther to the east, that the plumbing doesn't work very well, frankly. And I don't know, when those properties were built, which was back a number of years ago, but not that many, I also know that some of the doctor's offices had signs up that says, you know, make sure you don't do this and you don't do that, and you've got to flush twice sometimes. So I really am concerned about that. That there's sufficient water and that there's sufficient pressure. Maybe it means putting in extra strong pumps or something along those lines.
Yeah, and like, you know, any development plan review application that goes before the planning board and is reviewed internally by our office, we do refer it to the Department of Water and Water Supply. You know, and they're definitely making sure to review for those factors, as well as make sure they're meeting all other, you know, USDO standards, as well as MS4 standards as well. I think this is actually outside of the combined sewer overlay. But yeah, I mean, those are things that'll be brought up under their review. And I think, you know, with the changes in building code too, I think, you know, there are going to be more energy efficient requirements for toilets and water as well. So I think that'll probably help to make the water pressure be more sufficient as compared to the other buildings that you were talking about.
Yeah, I have a lot more confidence in the professional staff and director that's there now. But I don't know how much a lot was overlooked when the other development occurred, which included the apartment building and all of the other buildings along Patroon Creek and whatever the name of that other development is there, 1357, 1359, and all that area.
Yeah, I can't speak to that, but we do have very thorough reviewers at the water department. They usually send the longest comment letters out of any department, which doesn't have necessarily anything to do with the quality of the review, but they are very thorough and they are very detail oriented when they do review our projects.
Okay. Any other thoughts, questions, comments on this potential project? Okay.
Interesting.
We also, in additional other business was brought up before the meeting began that we might want to consider having an extended meeting or a special meeting concerning the 76 project on 2nd Avenue because of the complexity of it and the number of steps that it has to go through. These two items I don't think will take up a lot of time. So would the board be willing to add 76 to the agenda to then focus on that project after we dispose of these two?
Yeah, sure. I think it's very important that we talk about 76. It's an extraordinary project with you know, a rather extreme scope.
I'm okay with it, Al.
Okay, thank you. Roman, you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm okay. No problem.
Okay. So Zach, what would we be expecting on this project when we look at it on 2 weeks from now? And are we making any decisions on it?
No decisions at this point because it's still being reviewed by the Common Council. So we haven't formally accepted the application because the zoning change hasn't been formally approved. But I think what the applicant's looking to do is really hear from the board members and try and answer any questions and hear any concerns you have, just so that they're able to understand them and address them as soon as possible in the review project, or excuse me, the review process. So I think they're probably looking to have something a little more dialogue centric with the board. So I think, you know, any questions or any comments that you already have on the application materials that have already been provided, it would be great to have those, you know, at the ready for the meeting on the 29th. You know, and if there's any topics of conversation that you wanted to relay to the applicant so they can kind of guide their presentation on that, we could also do it that way as well. But I think they're really just they're really hoping to get as much feedback from you on the overall project and answer any questions or revise the materials to you know, meet those comments as soon as possible so that they're staying on schedule.
Okay. All righty, we'll move forward on that then. Are there any other projects, comments that the board would like to discuss? Anything that you need to bring up before we sign off, or are we okay?
I mean, I think on my end, and Amy, feel free to jump in after me if you have any other comments. Right now, we just have a few conditional use permit applications in the process that are being reviewed. None of them will be ready for this time at the meeting. And then a few other projects that are still in the process, but I don't think anything else. I do know that the applicant for 76 just raised their hand. So Al, I'll leave that to you if you want to respond to their question. The applicant asks, how do we know what to prepare for the upcoming meeting in the absence of this workshop?
I would suggest that the planning staff give them some direction there, because I think the main item is, you know, getting the zoning through, and the Common Council hasn't acted on it yet. So that's a critical item right there.
Yeah, and I mean, I would say is my comment to the board and to the applicant is just thinking about the design of the building, as well as any features or elements or concerns, you know, about traffic, noise, light, anything that's coming up as, you know, a consideration in your mind as board members that you want to relay to the applicant so they can respond to that verbally or take that feedback and incorporate that into modification to the application materials. And the applicant stating that a vote is anticipated on the 21st.
And I would mention to the board that all of the documents 476 are on the Dropbox, and you could look them up there, as well as if there are any updates. I imagine, Zach, you will put them in there before the board meeting.
Yep.
Okay. Any other things? Amy, do you have anything to report?
I was just going to mention that I believe that the applicants for 60 Colvin may also have some updates to give the board. I don't know the exact answer to that, but I believe that they might have some information about the additional environmental testing that they've done.
They have done the testing?
They have done the testing, and it's my understanding that they should have results and they should be able to give you guys an update. I'm not 100% sure of that, but to the extent that, you know, it's an existing application that's being reviewed by the board, I think it makes sense to give them a few minutes to update the board as to the status.
Is the board agreeable to that for the next meeting?
Yes.
Okay, well, we'll get that on the agenda, and we just want to make sure that we stick with just the report and not go through a whole additional
Right.
review of the project.
Al, would you like me, and board members as well, would you like me to put that as another business item as opposed to a, you know, current business or public meeting item?
Yes, I think so. As
Move
long,
at
you
the
know,
discretion
again,
of the chair.
confine it specifically to the. Say that again, Chris, please. Chris, you're muted. Did we lose him?
Sorry,
I didn't
Al,
know what Chris said.
I said that, no, I said we can move at the discretion of the chair for the meeting. If you wanted to add that agenda item, whatever your purview was, I'm fine.
Yep, okay. Yeah, and I think, again, it would be just an item to report on that specific issue, which was hanging there and at the last meeting, and they agreed to go ahead with further test borings concerning the supposed contamination of the site. Alrighty. If there's nothing else, I will declare the meeting over and we'll reconvene in 2 weeks. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Take care.
Have a good night.
All right, bye-bye.
Good night.